We're going to talk about innovation without borders, or as I like to frame this panel, a reminder that there's a world outside the United States. So let's get into it. Hans, I want to start with you. You've been in the venture capital field for a long time. How has the conversation about non-US markets, tech outside the US, how has that changed, particularly recently, given the whole interest in AI?
Sure, I'll be happy to get us started. I've been doing this for 20 years, from 2005 to now. And prior to being a VC, I was a technology banker and a founder during the first era of internet. And the narrative from the first time, whether it's Internet 1.0 with Yahoo to Google of the world, or with hardware like Cisco and Sun Microsystem of the world, the narrative was that all the innovation happened in Silicon Valley. And then fast forward to the second era with mobile internet and the cloud computing, a lot of stuff was copying from US to Asia, but then the Asia innovation started to happen. And then you have internet companies that end up expanding beyond Asia into US and other places. At the same time, you have innovation happening in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan on the semiconductor side that persisted throughout. But we will say that the third era now with AI is probably the biggest of them all, and bigger than one or two combined. And ChatGPT got to 300 million in active users faster than any app in the world, faster than WeChat, faster than Facebook Messenger, faster than Slack. And so the market cap creation, value creation over the last 3 years, since November 2022 to now, is in the trillions of dollars. And so it is just so immense and massive. But most people tend to only focus on Silicon Valley, but from where we see innovation happen everywhere.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some of the opportunities in other markets, but I want to bring in Ih-Ming. I'm from Hong Kong, and we're always grumbling like, man, Singapore looks like it's always got its act together. So let's talk about Singapore. It wants to be an AI nation. Can you tell us a bit more about kind of what Singapore is trying to do? What's your pitch on Singapore being a leader in this space?
Thanks so much, Nick. I think for Singapore, our focus is really on helping global companies fully leverage whatever we have in our ecosystem. Right? It does take a village, right? And building off our strengths as a business hub. Certainly in the AI space, trusted infrastructure is very important. Talent and being open to that, but also making sure that our local talent base is up to scratch. And then, of course, policy or a business-friendly environment, and providing some regulatory certainty, if you will. So I think all these and making sure that all these factors kind of work in concert. And businesses, everybody's in a different business. Focusing on real-world use cases, rather than PowerPoint presentations is extremely important. I think raising a lot of money is great, but finding customers is better. Right? And so in our ecosystem, I work in the government. Obviously, we can't do everything, but we bring corporate players, the public research infrastructure, and other players in the ecosystem and encourage them. So we've been quite fortunate. In the last 2 years or so, we refreshed kind of a national AI strategy at the national level, and then making sure we kind of click through that and making sure that companies can actually benefit from the funding that goes towards talent and reskilling, making sure that we actually, to some extent, facilitate and broker connections between technology providers, for example, coming from the US, and people who are actually reference customers, or people who have that kind of risk appetite or that want to be able to push that boundary. So over the last couple of years, we're very fortunate coming to about, in the last 2 years, coming to 40 AI centers of excellence that are actually focusing on real-world use cases and scaling that globally.
So Wendy, I want to turn to you, and we're going to talk a lot about industrial robotics and kind of what that sector looks like globally. But before I do that, Intrinsic just put out some new research with DeepMind and UCL called Robo Ballet, and I want to give you a chance to talk about what that was before we get into the rest of the world.
Sure. Just a little bit about Intrinsic. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Alphabet, so we're like the youngest sister to Google, Waymo, etc. We are really the Android for robotics and AI. So what we're looking to do is to abstract the complexity of robotics and AI so that people can really build real-world applications, to Chinmei's point. The research, we were fortunate enough to have, we were on the front page of the FT, actually, last week, with our research with DeepMind and UCL called RoboBallet. Really, that's we've used deep reinforcement learning to learn how to choreograph robots, multiple robots, in a way where they don't collide with each other and where it's much, much more productive. So traditional robotics is very brittle. You have to program things very specifically. And what we've done is used artificial intelligence, in effect, to make it easy to coordinate many, many different robots, and in a way where you can really have much higher production throughput. So for example, rather than having 4 robots working together, we can have 8 to 10. And the productivity is beyond 2x in some of these scenarios. The thing that's been tough around robotics and AI is robotics is hardware as well. And so what we really do is bridge that complexity between hardware and software. So if you like, we're really applying, the big breakthroughs in AI and application have really been very digital only so far, text, video, speech, etc. We're looking at physical AI. And I think there's a huge opportunity in that to break that, but it's a complex set of skills that are required to make that really applicable.
And to stick to kind of industrial robotics, I mean, China's very strong in this space. They make the vast majority of the world's industrial robotics. How is that Chinese strength kind of changing the conversation about industrial robots? Are there insights that can be gleaned from their success in that sector?
Yes. I mean, we're very international, so we have teams in Germany and in Singapore. Thanks to Chin Mi, actually. We also have a grant from the EDB, so we appreciate that. And we can't help but work with partners who work everywhere. So both in China, obviously, because there's huge manufacturing knowledge and expertise in China, as there is in Germany. And so we have teams that try to learn from that. Again, though, the expertise we have in AI in particular, Asia is also interested in how we apply that. And so we're combining sort of industrial expertise from these different regions with the software engineering and AI expertise we have from the Valley. So that's how we're actually bridging across there. And I feel like that collaboration is important. I think China, as you know, it's changed with the open sourcing of things like DeepSeek. In some ways, China's starting to drive some of that innovation, and it's open to driving that. It's sharing that. And we actually see an openness like that even in things like robotics as well.
So we've talked about kind of non-US to US. Let's also maybe pivot to US to non-US. Hans, what do kind of startups have to keep in mind as they think about going global, going to new markets, new cultures, new ways of doing things? What do founders and startups have to keep in mind?
We're seeing more and more founders in the US that's building business for the global market. We're an investor, my partner Glenn, that our investment in Vercel. And the founder came from Latin America originally. And you're seeing companies like Enter.ai out of Brazil that's automate legal tech and leveraging AI, and the fact that Brazil has 90% of labor lawsuits in the entire world. So they can have biggest data set to train from. So you're seeing innovation happening both from companies that's outside of the US, leveraging competitive advantage of their nation, as well as founders from everywhere around the world coming to Silicon Valley and New York to build global AI businesses. And as a result, because they come from all over the world, they're just naturally more in tune to what's needed beyond the US. And therefore, think about building applications and solutions that's catered to even the non-English population. We are invested in Anthropic and love how they're doing, but you look at Cohere, who spend all the time out of Canada dealing with the non-English language needs around AI. So there are room for differentiation, and that's what makes this world interesting.
We do have room for audience questions, so think of a question while I turn back to Ih-Ming. Let's maybe kind of go back and focus on what's happening in Asia. I mean, what are you seeing based in Singapore? What's happening with AI in Asia? What are Asian companies thinking about AI? What are Western companies in Asia thinking about AI? How is this environment? What's it look like from Singapore?
Sure. Well, I mean, generally speaking, I wouldn't even necessarily classify as Asian and Western. I think any company, to a similar point earlier, small or large, has to really think global on day one, figure out ways to leverage the capabilities where they can find them and can access them. And that's everything from talent to being in a business-friendly environment. I mean, when we were in some of the discussions, in other discussions as part of Forbes, and there was some talk about, regulatory overhang and, uncertainty and thinking long term, right? So I think for us, our focus, we can't be everything to everyone. Our focus is to provide as much business certainty as possible. In the regulatory space, everybody kind of comes at it a little bit differently. In AI, for example, I mean, Europe is a bit more aggressive. It comes, and very ex ante, before the fact kind of regulation, which makes it quite challenging for smaller companies. In the US, it's very much kind of more voluntary, if you will. And those two are very extreme. So for us, we have a bit more of we look at a practical, balanced kind of principle approach, and then provide as much certainty as possible for people to move quickly. Right, move quickly, but also risk managed sort of way. So that's how I would think about it, working with companies.
All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any at all? No? Then I'll just keep talking. Hans, you mentioned kind of in your first answer how in kind of previous eras of innovation, kind of Silicon Valley was the place to do it. And the US is still very strong in this. I mean, it's where founders want to go. It's got the strongest equity markets. I mean, to maybe phrase this maybe a bit bluntly, is Silicon Valley still the premier place for global innovation? Does it have to worry about competition from other tech hubs?
I think it's very easy to look at a lot of things as a sort of zero sum and look at which country is the most supreme and et cetera. But in reality, different countries are going to be good at different things. When it comes to software, there's no question Silicon Valley still leads innovation in many, many, many ways. Yep. And the open AI of the world and the Anthropic world takes talent globally, and many of them in Silicon Valley, and it's a special, special place. And that's why both Wendy and I are based there. At the same time, in Asia, when it comes to manufacturing, especially high-end manufacturing, when it comes to semiconductor, most advanced chips, you look at EV, solar panels, rare minerals, there's a lot of stuff that you need to go into the device that we have in the US that come from outside of US. And then for both Europe and Latin America, there are also interesting applications being developed. So it is kind of uneven, but Silicon Valley is not the only game in town, and you see different countries being good at different things.
Does global tech talent still find, do they still want to come to the US? I mean, outside the US, you do hear some murmurings about, some of the headlines we see about difficulty of getting visas, immigration crackdowns. Is the US still attractive to kind of foreign founders, foreign tech talent?
It is an ongoing discussion, and when it comes to this issue, Silicon Valley will remain very pro-immigrant. Because, even Steve Jobs, he's a second-gen immigrant, fathers from Syria. And there's a lot of things going on that Elon's from South Africa. There's a lot of things going on in Silicon Valley that you need that openness. But America has its own internal dynamics as well, between the red states, blue states, et cetera. So it is an ongoing debate, but he feels that there's still a lot of people in Silicon Valley and New York care about having that openness. And we need that to attract the best talent around the world to come here.
I think you can't ignore, I mean, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been funded by Europe and by America. It is a different experience. Fundamentally, the home runs, the investor mindset in the US is still about making big home runs, and they're prepared for 90% of those companies to fail, ultimately. But they're also prepared to reinvest in founders that go again. So what you get is a much faster iteration of innovation, much more ambition, and the founders learn quickly, multiple times. So I think you cannot deny that. That still happens in the Valley today. So I think from an investment point of view, that's there, and talent. But internationally, what we're seeing is, I think, to your point, with anything like manufacturing or really, we're obviously in physical AI, you cannot ignore the skill set, the expertise. The US, 53% of skilled labor does not exist anymore for the roles that are needed for manufacturing in the US. So that has to be replaced in some way. And I think the only way to do it now is through intelligent automation, especially if we want to bring that reshoring of manufacturing back to the US.
We have a question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Gillian Manis. I'm from the European Innovation Council. We're the innovation. We have a 50 billion euro fund from the European Commission. Europe just appropriated 800 billion to something called ReArm Europe. It's defense. Yep. And as we are moving a lot into dual-use technology and dual-use investment around defense, and let me just say, I'm not talking about war, I'm talking about defense, I'm talking about international security. How are you playing a role in that? Are you playing a role in that? And how do you see that playing out on a global level where defense and investment in defense is actually can be something positive, and is that part of your roadmap? I know Singapore's, every country is different, but Europe is trying to play a role with the US and all of us benefiting.
So I might add a couple more points there too. I mean, obviously, I think there is this question about manufacturing, hard tech, real products versus, real world products versus software. I mean, and so kind of, in addition to kind of the question on defense, just like more broadly, like what's kind of the right balance between manufacturing and software? And maybe I'll go to Wendy and Ih-Ming for this, but maybe you first.
We're very much look at it as we're a software ecosystem platform. Yeah. And in that, we actually also recently bought the development arm of Open Robotics, which is the biggest open source robotics community in the world. So ROS, many of you know, maybe ROS 2. Most folk building robotic applications will start there. And like all platforms, at some point, and especially with an open source platform, you need to let different verticals build the applications they need to build. So even though right now we're focused more on manufacturing and industrial, we have no doubt at some point folk will use it for things like defense. They already do. ROS is used in defense applications. So we're more about enabling an ecosystem than anything else. If we solve some of the manufacturing skills, clearly advanced manufacturing is part of defense as well. And so there will be natural crossover, I think, there.
Ih-Ming, how do you feel about this manufacturing question? Singapore has a surprisingly strong manufacturing sector. It is attracting manufacturing investment, particularly in semiconductors. How do you see this balance between hardware and software?
Well, I think maybe two main reactions. The first is we're a small country, right? And if we think about being resilient or being competitive, we ultimately need to be quite connected. And that's not just to the immediate region, but best-in-class capabilities everywhere. And that applies both in hardware and software. If I kind of also respond to the question about, I think the opportunity for defense or dual use, I think technology can be used in various applications. I think commercial applications, the market is way larger than defense in the big scheme of things. But I would also encourage people to think about ecosystems beyond their primary kind of proximate immediate region. I think it's a global world. I think the important thing is to look further afield. All right. Obviously, within your circle of control or influence is great. But I think being interconnected is extremely important. We are already pretty interconnected. I think moving too far in the opposite direction would be a problem.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, please, the back.
Thank you to the panel. I'm Joe Atkinson. I'm the Global Chief AI Officer for PwC. Man, good to see you. I'm curious, this conversation about talent flow, innovation flow, investment flow, what the panel's views are on sovereign AI efforts that are happening in many territories and regions around the world, and how should multinationals be thinking about balancing what feels like very, very competing priorities in terms of investment?
I might throw the first answer to Ih-Ming as our government representative. He can go first.
Well, I don't have a very strong view personally on sovereign AI. I think every government needs to make their own choices. And so I think our approach to AI or promoting it, look at say, governments make their own choices about what they need for their sovereign purposes. And from a Singapore perspective, we have our own needs. That's internal to us. But our role in the global ecosystem goes way beyond what's relevant for our national need. And so in the business realm, we focus a lot on real-world use cases, things that are go beyond experimentation, which is nice, but ultimately are going to impact lives. I think the greatest, some of the theaters or arenas, if you will, financial services, healthcare, I think is a huge area of opportunity. I think robotics and manufacturing, huge area of opportunity as well. And so I think it's a wide open space.
Hans, what do you think about this sovereign AI question? It's a big conversation point in Middle East, Asia, What's your views on this?
When we were making investments in the area, we only picked one for foundational model. It was Anthropic. We did consider investing sovereign AI companies. It's just that the talent war is so intense, and you gotta have the best of the best. And they need to have customers that give them feedback to make them better and better and better. So I see the need for sovereign AI for national security reason, but it's just hard to expect them to be the best of the very best. So I think you gotta have both. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But pick what's best for your country that plays into national competitive advantages. I said earlier that Silicon Valley is a place for software. Yet, ironically, the top two market cap companies out of Silicon Valley is NVIDIA and Apple. Both are hardware plays. So, and both of them are started by first or second gen immigrant. And so, having that open kind of border policy to attract talent. And when I look at Europe, this is a perfect time to be a lot more open, to include a lot more STEM students from around the world to go to Europe to innovate on AI in Europe. Whoever's more open still has a chance to win the next cycle. There are a lot of people argue that the current way, whether through OpenAI or Anthropic, is not the best way to achieve true AGI. There could be another different way of doing things happening. And so it is never too late to figure out a way to attract more talent to your place to have a chance to win the next one.
So to close us off, I want to ask the same question to all of you, and please be brief. If you had an investor in front of you and you could shake him and be like, pay attention to this region, you moron, what would your answer be? First, maybe Hans, you go first.
I think it's hard to ignore China and India. Both places have an immense amount of STEM talent. China graduates 4.2 million STEM graduates a year. India is like 2.6, and those figures are already dated. So these are two countries that even we don't invest in them, it's something that we pay a lot of attention to.
Wendy, what would your answer be, briefly?
You can't ignore the US still. I mean, there's the AI development going there is still, outstripping, I think, what's going on globally. So I think you've got to invest there too. But I would say that the specific applied AI is going to really matter. I think there's the big run for superintelligence. There's not going to be one pure winner. And then actually applying that into real-world use cases that are useful for human beings is going to take specialized data. And I think that's where the competition is going to come. Yeah. And so it's not a one-winning game. And I think that is going to come depending on which industry you go to in the world. Yeah.
Ih-Ming, last word. What people pay attention to? What region?
I
Not
mean,
Singapore.
We see investors we see it as partnerships. And our focus is on crowding in the resources and the wherewithal to strengthen the partnership for the long haul. We see it's a marathon, not a sprint.
So I want to thank our panel for some great topics on innovation globally, in the US, outside the US. If you want to hear more conversations about AI and innovation, Fortune is hosting the Fortune Innovation Forum in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia in November 17th and 18th. So we'll be putting together a great program for that in Kuala Lumpur. Again, I want to thank Wendy, Hans, Ih-Ming for joining me today and answering all of our great questions.